Inflation, deflation.
Recession, depression.
A lot of words flying around these days, but the big question is, how are you going to prepare for what lies ahead?
Experts are predicting a recession.
Forbes recently released their prediction of late 2023, early 2024. But here's the thing. The word doesn't mean anything because it's kind of like in the summer. In the summer, you pay more attention to the feels like temperature than you do the actual temperature on the thermometer. And I think these economic times are a little bit like that. I think we're paying more attention to how we are feeling rather than what the experts are saying.
But there are some strategic steps that you can take to face the possible recession of 2023. And we're going to talk about that.
Hey, in case you don't know us, I'm Hope.
And I'm Larry.
And this is Under the Median, where every week we talk about practical frugality. We're going to share some steps with you in this video that we think you should be taking right now in light of the fact that prices will continue to rise in 2023. Now, I did a little bit of digging, and it looks like prices aren't expected to rise across the board. It really depends a lot on what you're considering purchasing.
Number one, don't go into debt. And if you're in debt, get out.
You know, I think right now especially, we see people that are really drawn to those 180 days, same as cash, 0% financing that stores are offering because they want to get things and they feel like they need to get them right now while they can still get them. The problem with that is that 180 days, it's a loan. And what happens if you are late on a payment or miss a payment or don't pay the whole amount back in that 180 days, then the interest rate on that loan goes from 0% to well over 20%, and the interest rate is backdated to day one of the loan. So avoid those things like the plague.
You know, the Fed's raised the interest rates about 6 times this year, and they're planning on probably doing that again in December.
And I think, once again, we look at that and say, so what does that mean for the average person? We're going to give you a specific example. Let's say you're shopping for a new home. You're going to get a 30-year loan. Now, if you had gotten that loan in January of 2022, you would have paid about 3% interest on that loan for 30 years. If you borrow $100,000, that means at the end of that 30 years, you would have paid back just a little over $150,000. But the interest rates right now just edging right to 7%. Now, here's what that means for that exact same loan. $100,000, 30 years. That means you're going to pay it back $240,000 instead of $150,000.
And you know, although we paid cash for this house, we really don't have a beef against taking out a mortgage. After all, a house is a major cost item.
But we do caution you, you want to put a really good down payment on that home that you're looking for. And if you can take a 15-year mortgage, then do it if you can support those payments on your salary. If you can't, go ahead, do a 30-year loan, but make extra payments and pay that baby off as soon as possible.
You know, there's a lot of different mortgage calculators online that can kind of help you compare the various scenarios. Our second piece of advice is buy items now while they're still relatively affordable.
And get those items that you're going to need, let's say, in the next 12 to 24 months. Now, Christmas is literally right around the corner. We got Black Friday coming up in just a few days, and that means that there are bargains galore. But what you need to do is make sure that you have a list, a written list of the items that you know you need to replace in your home. Now, speaking of needed items, we're partnering today with Opus. They make amazing portable power stations. You're going to need to think about sources of backup power right now.
Yeah, because of the way of the grid, possible winter storms, there's so many ways that the power can go out. And the item that we're featuring tonight is the Opus 2400 watt unit. This is their largest and newest unit. We love the ability that it has to power large draw items for quite a long time. In fact, we did a test on our refrigerator and it powered it for 26 hours. One of the greatest features that we liked about it was the ability to charge it up quickly using solar. If you buy the 4 240-watt panels that are designed for the unit, it will actually charge in full sun in 4 hours. So even though it's a big unit, it will charge really fast.
Now, we told you to look into purchasing items you're going to need in the next 12 to 24 months, but we also want you to get a really great deal. And Opus is offering an amazing sale for Black Friday, and they are going to seriously reduce all the prices on their website. But we have a special coupon for you that will allow you to get an extra 15% off of that lowest price.
The code for this offer is Best Sale, and that is active from November 25th to November 30th. We'll leave the links in the description of this video.
If you really like to get the inside scoop, there's actually a way that you can do that with Opus. They have started a brand new Facebook group. There are giveaways, special offers,
discounts, and product trials.
Now, we'll make sure that there's a link to that Facebook group also in the description of this video. Now, let's get back to some ways that you can prepare for rising prices in 2023.
The next thing you should do is stock up your pantry and freezer.
When you do find a really great deal, you need to buy it in bulk. One of the ways that we do this without raising our grocery budget is every month we divide our grocery budget into fifths. 20% of that amount is set aside specifically for stocking up when we find a can't believe it great deal. And the other 80% we use throughout the other 4 weeks of the month. And this works perfectly for us in order to get what we need, have everything stocked up, and still not feel like we're pinching those pennies and raising that amount of money we're spending on groceries.
You'll want to keep an up-to-date inventory on what you have in your freezers, your refrigerators, and your pantries so that you know what you have on hand and what you might need to purchase if you run low.
Now, if you're in the process of stocking or restocking your pantry, we have a giveaway. We have a free ebook. It's the Pantry Stock Up Workbook. There'll be a link to that workbook. It's free. There's a link in the description of the video.
And hey, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe. The fourth thing that we would recommend doing is create a game plan and test it out ahead of time.
Now, we sort of alluded to that when we said that we had hooked up our Opus 2400 and we had run our refrigerator for 26 hours. We did that specifically because we're coming up with scenarios. What if the power goes out? How are we making plans in order to create the amount of energy and power that we need in order to power the items in this house that we would need to have on during an emergency? And so that was part of that plan.
Yeah, and we've spent a lot of time with the unit making sure that we know how it operates and how it's going to be used in the time of an emergency, because you don't want to wait till you're in an emergency to try to figure these things out.
And speaking of preps, you want to make sure, and this is the next tip, that you take the time not only to test out scenarios and figure out what you're going to do in an emergency situation ahead of time and test out those theories, but you want to make sure that you have everything written down. Know exactly what your preps are, know exactly where they're located, know exactly what they'll do, know exactly how they work, know exactly what you need to do in order to maintain those so they're ready for you to use during an emergency situation. Don't buy something, set it on the shelf, and then wait for an emergency and then figure out how to use it.
Now is not the time to guess. And this will kind of dovetail into our fifth recommendation, is have things written down in a document.
We call this our what if plan. Literally, we write down what happens if. Now, part of this has to do with emergency situations, but part of it also has to do with rising prices. What if gas continues to go up and it goes up to, say, $7, $8, $10, $12 a gallon? We write down those scenarios and say, what are our game plans if something like that happens? Now, instead of allowing that to sort of scare the bejeebers out of us, what that does is allow us to prep for something which may or may not be happening, but it does take all the fear element out of it, because we know if something happens, we got a plan and we're ready to go.
Yeah, or what if food prices go up 20% in 12 months? You'll want to be able to figure out what you'll need to cut back on, what lifestyle things that you need to do to change in order to cope with these rising prices.
So a what if list. Think about making one for your home. We would love to know what goes on your what if list. What are you concerned about? And you're trying to figure out what you would do if something happens in that area of your budget.
Keep a close eye on your budget throughout the year. It's not something you just set and forget, especially in a climate that's changing so much.
Yeah, we used to probably do a deep dive into our budget numbers every 6 months, and now it's at least once a quarter. And as we begin to see these fluctuations economically, we could very well go to more than once a quarter in order to just sort of have that face-to-face time where we say, here's where we're at financially, here's what we're seeing happening in the realm of how much things are costing us. And that allows us to really have that time to come up with more of a game plan.
Our next point is to keep your emergency fund fully stocked. You know, we really recommend at least a 3 to 6 month store of money that you can pull from in the case of an emergency. You know, if stuff hits the fan, and we're hearing some talk about that, you may have to really drastically cut back. Obviously, that will mean things like not going out to eat.
Yeah, we're assuming with that emergency fund, that is to fund all of your basic needs, all the things you absolutely have to have in order to keep a roof over your head and food in your stomach. That's what we're looking at when it comes to an emergency budget. 3 to 6 months.
Now, you want to have an emergency fund ready so you can take care of your basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, the things that you need to live by.
Seek out balanced, reputable people to give you information. There's a lot of people who are spreading fear all over the internet right now. Now, we generally say that we're not going to be driven by fear. Instead, we are going to plan. We want to plan instead of panic.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where we're at in that whole scenario. And we have found some people to follow that are giving balanced information. Now, some of you, I've mentioned this before, and some of you wanted to know who is the economist that we follow. His name is Brian Westbury, and we actually had the pleasure of hearing him speak once a few months ago and got to chat with him and kind of get to know him. He has a weekly newsletter that sort of gives a synopsis of what's going on in the economy right now. I'm going to make sure, just in case you want to follow him, there'll be a link to sign up for his newsletter in the description of the video.
We also like to watch some good video channels like City Prepping, Provident Preppers, and of course, Prepper Princess, who gives very practical, down-to-earth advice.
And number 9, probably the most important thing that we're going to share with you in this video, don't panic. Panic breeds making quick decisions, which may or may not be the best decision for you to make at that time. Make sure that you are taking a deep breath, that you are evaluating all of your options, and then making a solid plan to move forward. Now, we do mention, of course, that when you make that solid plan, once again, you're going to want to check your progress and see how that plan is working, and check it pretty often right now. And be sure that you are ready to pivot if things aren't going the way that you anticipated they would go.
And if you've done this planning, you can face these uncertainties with confidence.
Now, all of these tips that we are sharing with you in this video are actually things that we do every single year in the 4th quarter of each year. But there are some other things that we do that you also might find super helpful. We did a video on it. We're going to leave it right over there, and you can take a look at it if you've not watched it yet.